Hi, everybody. This is Daniel Gray. I am the Trailer Park Prophet, and we're broadcasting live from beautiful downtown Crestone, Colorado on Blog Talk Radio. This is Sunday on Monday. Almost forgot. Okay, let's see what was going on this weekend. I think primarily everybody was interested in all of the NFL playoff games. Everybody I talked to and the kind of chatter I saw on Facebook, a lot of people were really into the playoffs. And of course, I'm from Colorado. And Denver hosted the San Diego Chargers yesterday, and the Broncos, the Denver Donkeys, as I like to call them, were victorious. And I still don't have cable or satellite. I wasn't able to watch the game. I did actually listen to the last part of the game on KOA. But I was really jonesing for some TV. I've gone now 2 months without television, without cable, and every once in a while I start jonesing. I really need some TV. I need some simple neuron stimulation. And yesterday was one of those days because I wanted to get a little piece of Broncomania. I wanted to be able to see a little bit of the game. No way could I watch a whole football game except for the Super Bowl. And even then I can have trouble too. But I like to just kind of check in, see how the Nuggets are doing once in a while, see how the Broncos are doing. I'm not like a fan like most people are. I don't care anymore. I have an interest, but I really don't care. I cared for the Broncos a lot, and the Nuggets too, back during the 70s and 80s and 90s. And my heart got broken so many times that after the Broncos won their first Super Bowl, I just said, that's it. I'm done. Or actually, it was after John Elway retired. I said, John Elway's retiring, I'm retiring. And I already kind of partially retired anyway, because it used to be I wouldn't miss a Bronco game for anything in the world. And a lot of my Sunday evolved around the Broncos during the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And after so many Super Bowl losses, I felt like those losses damaged my soul, almost damaged my DNA. I'd had enough. I couldn't take any more defeat, heartache, the build up and everything, and then you lose, and then you build up and you lose, and you build up and you lose. After a while, at least for me, it just did me in. I couldn't care anymore. And then I was totally retired from the Broncos for, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. And then they drafted, or they got a hold of Jay Cutler, and that kind of brought me back a little bit because I thought he was kind of a gunslinger like Elway. So I started watching a little bit. All right, enough of that. This is, of course, the Trailer Park Prophet. And if you'd like to be on the air, you can do so. All you got to do is dial 646-716-8506. So if you want to talk to the Trailer Park Prophet, be on the air, you can do that. You're welcome. I promised you guys on Friday that we would make sure and do a report from Gunnison, Colorado, and I'm going to keep my promise because I haven't been working hard enough on the local Friday segment, so I'm going to try and right that wrong and do my homework. So I actually do have the Gunnison Country Times right here in front of me, and really there's not much in it.
All right. A lot of times with these little local newspapers, there's not a lot going on. And so, but, actually, it's worth it. This is actually worth reporting on. Now, above the fold of the Gunnison Country Times, or as I like to refer to it, the Gunnison Dead Tree News, the actual headline is Healthcare Conundrum, Healthcare Conundrum, and it says that the Gunnison County Healthcare Coverage Guide, Kelsey Vander Veen, displays Connect for Health Colorado, that CHC web portal. The county in Gunnison, now Gunnison, I think, has something like 12,000 people in it, give or take, this season. And in the county, there were 576 people who enrolled in the CHC, which is Colorado's name, or their Obamacare name. And this article is written by Laura Anderson, and she says hundreds of people in Gunnison County who signed up for health insurance under the Affordable Care Act are now receiving benefits, yet it seems that many locals who would qualify for expanded Medicaid or tax credits through the so-called healthcare exchange are dragging their feet or are still wading through the process. As of January 1, 576 individuals in Gunnison County have signed up for health care through Connect for Health Colorado CHC private insurance exchange. That's about 1/3 of those Colorado Health Institute projects will enroll by 2016. So she's saying that there's going to be upwards of 1,500 people from Gunnison that are going to sign up. And actually, I misspoke. There may only be like 13,000 people in Gunnison County. That's the right number. And then, of course, the other headline above the fold in the Gunnison Country Times, or as I like to call it, the Gunnison Dead Tree News, it says Dems focus on 2014 session, and it's just a fluff piece by the Gunnison Dead Tree News editor, Will Shoemaker, just giving free publicity to Democrats in Gunnison, which, by the way, Gunnison only has 13,000 people, but they have 2 House districts. They're represented by 2 different House districts. And that is important, and I want to mention this because this rarely happens in redistricting, where a little county gets cut in half by 2 House districts. But in this case it did, and the reason being is that Gunnison was punished for whatever reason. It could be because of one legislator that was representing Gunnison. I can't think of her name right now, but she was really controversial, and she was kind of pushed out of the Democratic Party, and then she ran as an independent. But she raised all kinds of hell down at the Colorado State House. She got elected to represent Gunnison as a state representative, but she went down there and she made a lot of enemies. So what happened was, during redistricting, they cut Gunnison in half. And that's like a fatal blow, almost. I mean, to a county to not have their own state representative. But now we have 2 state representatives. But I wanted to bring that up because it's very rare that happens, and there were a lot of other reasons for that happening, and all of it had to do with retribution, basically. I reported on this story out of Gunnison, another article written by Will Shoemaker. He's the editor of the Times, and I like to bring up Will Shoemaker because he kind of cracks me up, in that he ended up marrying a girl who was worked at the coffee shop called The Bean in Gunnison. And I'm sorry I have to bring this up, but it just cracks me up when an editor of a newspaper
is hanging out at the local coffee shop and ends up marrying one of the waitresses. For some reason, that just screams mediocrity for some reason. I know it's not fair. The girl's a lovely girl and maybe she's smarter than most, but something about an editor of a newspaper taking advantage of a situation at a coffee shop or a restaurant or a bar and marrying the help. It's like marrying the help. You know what I mean? But somehow it's even worse. I don't know why. Just worse. Anyway, attorney says that Leatherwood is going to repay the school district in Gunnison. He got his bond reduced for let's see, it says here it wasn't exactly an admission of guilt for the 8 felony charges faced by the Gunnison Watershed School District's former Director of Information Technology, but it was close. Denver defense attorney Forrest Lewis indicated Tuesday that his client, Cannon Leatherwood, intends to repay the school district for money allegedly stolen. Our concern on this side of the courtroom is to get some money back to the district, some restitution, Lewis declared. I know it's early, and we might as well say it. But allegedly, get a load of this. Leatherwood, while he was employed with the school district in Gunnison, he's charged with 8 felony counts for theft of allegedly funneling more than $400,000 from the district through technology supply companies that he headed. The district administrators reportedly became suspicious after a check deposited stamped for Colorado Computer Consultants, LLC, was found in the copy room of the Lake Administration Building in July of last year. So anyway, I mean, this guy, he's running the IT for the school district and figured out a way to funnel money to his own account, and I'm just wondering how much of this goes on all over government, particularly local government. I bet you this is all over the United States. Skimming money, buying from sweetheart vendors, kickbacks, jobs. Amazing. Let's see here. Well, anyway, the lawyer that's representing Leatherwood also represented Gunnison lawyer Phil Kingsmith, and we talked about him. He got busted for defrauding old people, taking their retirement money and spending it on himself. That is just so low. Looks like the Gunnison area was visited recently by the land management. Let's see, what's this guy's name? Oh, okay. This week, the BLM Deputy Director Steve Ellis traveled to Colorado from Washington, D.C., making a stop in Gunnison on Monday, spending time working his way through the Colorado field offices for face-to-face time with managers and other employees. But the Gunnison field office was of special importance to Ellis in light of the recent arson fire at the agency's former headquarters. I forgot about that. There are still no suspects in the fire, which happened more than a month ago. Ellis took time to tour the former BLM office with the Gunnison field manager Brian St. George and Southwest District Manager Lori Armstrong, and to reassure employees that the matter has the attention of top officials. He says, the incident we have here with the fire at the office was very troubling to me, explained Ellis. We will leave no stone unturned in trying to investigate this and determine who did this. I wonder who in the hell tried to set the BLM office on fire. And then here's another guy, Deputy District Attorney for the 7th Judicial District, who was arrested late last year for a DUI charge, no longer works for the office, though it's unclear whether John Lou Mehaleg resigned or was terminated. So here's another example of another public employee who got drunk. I mean, a lawyer, and we've had the same problem with district attorneys in Gunnison. The last guy I remember that was in trouble, there was another DUI guy before this DUI attorney for the county got busted. Then there was another attorney for the county got busted for DUI. And then the attorney before that got busted for soliciting prostitution in Montrose. One case of flu confirmed in Gunnison County. Alright, let's see here. I think that's pretty much it, now that I think about it. It wasn't a real
Newsy kind of week in the Gunnison Valley. No problems at the airport. In fact, they're not having to use de-icing techniques. Oh, one thing that's kind of interesting. Actually, there is one interesting story we need to talk about. And that is the consolidation of 2 guide services in Gunnison County. CBMG and Irwin Guides merge. And the Irwin Guides I was telling you about are connected with Russian oil money. And they're also connected with the ex-mayor and a real popular city council member up there in Crestone'Gunnison. And they're developing Irwin without a master plan. And they set up all these shell corporations, so one corporation does something over here for a while, another corporation does something over here for a while. And their intent is, of course, to develop Irwin, which is a beautiful natural place. And, of course, these people are all progressive socialists. But they're doing it without having a master plan. And now it's obvious that this Irwin Guides has taken over this CBMG guide company, which means that they've consolidated that area. And these licenses, these Colorado state licenses to guide, are worth a lot of money. I mean, just the licenses themselves are big. And of course, the people, like I said, that were behind Irwin Guides are, in my mind, nefarious. There's these 6 corporations, and they're foreign corporations in Colorado, and you can't find out who's running them, who owns them, and it's just creepy. And of course, you know, Chris Dickey at the Gunnison Dead Tree News, I mean, he's not going to look into this critically. He's going to report on it, and that's it. Because Chris Dickey and some of his friends, he's protecting them, because you can bet your bottom dollar Chris Dickey knows people that are part of those 6 nefarious foreign corporations that are running the development of Lake Irwin. Unreal. And it does say here, Irwin Guides seeks to be a premier guiding service and purveyor of outdoor activities. Born at elevation of 11,000 feet at the base of Scarp Ridge, Irwin Guides employs staff and guides with a rich heritage of backcountry exploration and adventure. The mission of Irwin Guides is to provide guided outdoor experiences and fun to participants of all ages and skills. And basically what they've done is privatize the forest. That's the other thing you need to know too. Now that Irwin Guides has more area up there, they basically have privatized the national forest. That's the other thing that kind of stinks. And all of these people for Irwin Guides and the Crestone'Gunnison News and the Gunnison Dead Tree News, all of them are all in on this deal, I bet you. If you were able to unlock all of these foreign corporations that are involved with Lake Irwin, you'll find out that a lot of those people are luminaries in the Gunnison area. It's just so
crooked. And they're the same ones, you know, that were belly aching about Halliburton. All right, back to healthcare, and Gunnison says here, in a basis on comparison to other counties, I think it's a pretty strong showing. She said, Ben Davis, the spokesman for the CHC, agreed. We feel good about enrollment numbers. He's the state guy in Colorado for Obamacare. He said, there's always room for growth and improvement when you look at our numbers, plus Medicaid numbers since October 1. 1/8 of uninsured people in Colorado now have health insurance. 1/8. Still, some local residents plan on signing up, but just haven't gotten around to it. Waiting for the right time of year, Charles Linton, manager of the Western Motel. Western Motel? Wait a minute. They must have sold the Western. I used to work there. Said that he hopes to sign up in the spring. The hotel is a small business that is not required to offer insurance, so Linton does plan on shopping for coverage through the CHC, which is Colorado's health exchange. He anticipates that he will be eligible for a tax credit through the program. So why hasn't he signed up yet? For Linton, his reason is seasonal. He says he's not inactive in the winter and that he always wears a helmet when he skis. I do a lot of logging and prospecting and spend a lot of time in the woods in the summer. He said that's the dangerous time of the year. He said that he plans on getting coverage by April. Davis of the CHC said that the best way to get procrastinators to sign up is by enacting deadlines. If you look at our monthly enrollment numbers beginning in October, we saw a sharp increase, and deadlines approached, he observed, but we're doing our best to encourage folks to enroll. Let's see. I don't know. I'm kind of burnt out on Obamacare. All right, that's your report from Gunnison County and the Dead Tree News. What time is it? It's 1:23. We're just about at the break. If you want to call, please do. You can do so. Just dial 646-716-8506. Again, that is 646-716-8506. All right, back to the notes. Where do I want to start? Everybody's talking about that deal in New Jersey with Governor Christie and someone on his staff cutting down the amount of lanes to one of the communities whose mayor didn't support Governor Christie's bid for re-election, Foxborough or something like that. And the lamestream media is all over that story. In fact, there's reports that the lamestream media has done 47 times more minutes of time reporting on Governor Christie than they have about IRS scandal involving the Tea Party. 47 times more. And the Tea Party story has been out there for 6 months. 6 months. And already the lane closure story in New Jersey by allegedly Governor Christie gets 47 times more press. I mean, that's just glaring indictment against the lamestream media. I like that. Glaring indictment. I wish I could say I made that up. Interesting story. This is from Pew Research. Pew. I got this story from CNN Politics. This was released today, I believe. No, it was released 3 days ago. CNN, while more Americans continue to identify as conservatives rather than liberals, new numbers by Gallup indicate that the percentage who label themselves
as liberals is at a new high. 23% of Americans identified themselves as liberals last year, up a percentage point from 2012 and 4 points over the past decade. And it's the highest level since Gallup started regularly measuring ideology in the current format in 1992. But, you knew there was going to be a but. But, that's still far below the 38% who identify themselves as conservatives in 2013, which was down a point from the previous year. 34% labeled themselves as moderates, also down a point from 2012. The rise in liberal identification has been accompanied by a decline in moderate identification, says a release by Gallup. Gallup says their 2013 results are based on more than 18,000 interviews from 13 separate polls they conducted last year. Now, I can tell you right now, that costs a lot of money, and Gallup does a scientific bang-up job of polling. So not much change. I mean, the headline really overstates what happened. And I'm not surprised that more people, 1%, claim to be liberal, you know, and I think in part is, I think liberals they're at a turning point right now, and I think they're starting to feel the pressure of the 2014 election. And I think they have it in the back of their minds, a lot of the hardcore liberals, that this country's headed the wrong direction. And they may have a sick feeling in their stomach, or they have some sort of little voice in their head, in their little organic computer, telling them that this Obama economy is all smoke and mirrors, and they know that the Federal Reserve is printing money at the tune of, what is it, $85 billion a month, or they're creating it digitally. And so liberals, I think they're panicked. And what I think I see happening is that they're really out there beating the drum, and they're trying to convince people that you need to be with us or against us. And I think that explains that 1% increase in people that are claiming they're liberal. And the other thing too is the left is relentless in their vilification of conservatives in the Tea Party. And I'm sure the guys over there at Media Research could tell you this, but the number of negative comments about the Tea Party in the lamestream media, there has to be like millions of them. And that has to have some effect, and that in my mind would explain some of that 2-point switch between conservatives and liberals. And I think that, again, I honestly feel that the liberals are desperate, and that they're getting meaner, and they're turning people off because they're mean, they're angry, and they're not happy warriors. All right? And I think that turns people off. That turns some people off because they've become they sense this urgency. That's what it is. They see the Obama administration falling apart. They see progressive socialism falling apart. So I think they're a little more aggressive. And they're out there proselytizing that the sky is going to fall in if the Republicans take over the U.S. Senate. And or when they eventually take back the White House. I really think that the liberals are panicked, and they're able to get out there and panic other people, and I think that explains why the conservatives lost a point and the liberals gained a point. Now that's a 2-point swing, and it is significant. Any swing in this kind of a scientific poll
particularly the way that Gallup does this particular poll. It gives you some direct insight into the pulse of the American people. But again, you know, the takeaway for me is still that only 23% Americans identify themselves as liberal. 23%. And you can have a little fun out there with your friends and relatives. Ask them what they think the breakout is for conservatives and liberals. I've done this before. And you'll be surprised. A lot of people really think that the liberals have the advantage in the USA. I'm telling you, they do. I tell you, most people you ask them, how many people in the USA are conservative, and how many people in the country by percentage are liberal, and my experience has been that something about most people will say something like 75% of people are liberal, and that only 10%, 15% are conservative. And they really think that the vast majority of people in the United States are liberal. And that's a product of the lamestream media and our one-size-fits-all union-run education industry. And you try this. I want you to try this at home. Try it on Facebook. Casually ask your friends, your relatives, or do it while you're standing in line at a cash register. But try it out. I mean, and ask yourself, of course. I'm sure you've already talked to yourself in your own mind, in your own organic computer, and asked yourself that same question. I know this because my audience, they're very prone to be involved in deep thinking. Constantly thought-provoking. That is the stereotypical Trailer Park Prophet audience member. By the way, you're listening to the Trailer Park Prophet. My name is Daniel Gray. We're broadcasting live from beautiful downtown Crestone, Colorado, on Blog Talk Radio. This is Sunday and Monday, where we like to talk about the big events of the week. And here I have a story here. Now, this is disturbing. And I got this story. It's from, get a load of this. It's called Shariva, and it's IsraelNationalNews.com. And I've actually done stories from this source before. They seem pretty good to me, but I've seen this story around the internet. But I like this story the best. And this is written by Ari Yassar, and it was published on the 7th. And it says, governmental sources report that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is behind the European boycott threats on Israel products and companies operated in the Judea, Samarian, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. A load of this. The EU, the European Union, published its guidelines last July boycotting Israeli companies operating over the 1949 armistice lines. And what this is about, in 1949, the UN created the State of Israel again. And during the ensuing wars and invasions by Israel's neighbors, Israel has kept land when they reconstitute, well, when they fought off Syria and they fought off Libya, they kept some of that land, and that's what they're talking about from the 72 wars. At any moment, Kerry, Secretary of State Kerry, is making sure that threats stay in check, but as soon as the peace talks fail, he intends to open the floodgates and spur on a full-blown international boycott on Israel, reports the Galia Zahara IDF radio. Palestinian Authority officials reported last September that Kerry was putting pressure on the EU to delay boycotts so as to give him an opportunity to push Israel into peace talks. That report also appears to support the new revelations regarding Kerry's manipulation of the anti-Israel boycotts. Now, this is called dirty dealing, and it's very unsavory as far as a political tactic by Secretary of State Kerry. I mean, really, that's underhanded. I can't ever remember hearing something like that. I mean, creating leverage through a independent world body on Israel, amazing. And I didn't know that there was any kind of discussions about any economic sanctions on Israel. I really didn't realize to this moment that kind of leverage or that tactic was being used on Israel. I mean, that's just unbelievable. I mean, that's the same kind of stuff we do to Iran. And Iran wants to build a nuclear bomb to wipe Israel off the map. And yet here's Israel being double dealt by the Secretary of State of the United States. I mean, this is clearly, it's despicable, really. And here's another sign, in case you haven't believed what I've said in the past, and that is the Obama administration foreign policy in regards to Israel is that they are not our ally and they're not our friend. Publicly, the Obama administration says that Israel is our ally, but their actions, and this is a perfect example of that, the actions of the Obama administration are clearly that the U.S. is not an ally of Israel's. And it says here, quote, that it is clear to us that there are large gaps between us, and this is not new, but it is certainly in our interest to continue negotiations and to continue to work to stabilize the situation and the relationship between us and the Palestinians, remarked Yoav Allen. Meanwhile, for the PA's part, a senior official recently was interviewed on Syrian TV, the first stage
to the program agreement saying the declared boycott guidelines are not recognized by Israel as legal precedent. And see, that's what I'm telling you. I never really heard of any of this kind of talk before. It says, do they expect that if we continue to give in, then the boycotts will stop? Remarked Eldad, noting that the leftist professor in Israel have been active in encouraging international academic boycotts. See, here again, isn't that weird? How even professors in Israel will go along with the Western progressive socialist. I find that remarkable, just how intellectually bankrupt academics are. I really find that amazing. It says here, Israel has been negligent up until now and dragged its feet when the first signs of the boycott of products from Judea and Samaria emerged. It declined to indict those factors who called for boycotts, and now we are paying the price. Man, academics. What? Academics should just teach the past and should not be actively involved in current politics. You know, it's a conflict of interest. You know what I mean?
You should be involved in teaching kids about virtue and history, how to think critically, not what to think. The last thing professors in universities should be doing is telling people what to think, how to think. And yet that's exactly what academia in America is doing, is telling kids how to think. Oh, you should see this beautiful picture of the fully restored Supreme Court. Oh my God, it's fabulous. The next story comes by way of the CBS News, an article here by Rebecca Kaplan. And the headline, and everyone was talking about this weekend, Supreme Court weighs Obama's recess appointments. Now, the deal here is that the Senate was in a procedural, the U.S. Senate was in a procedural recess, all right? But they didn't adjourn, all right? Well, actually, okay, technically they weren't in a recess. They just adjourned. And when you adjourn, you would either adjourn to a time certain, or you call the deliberative body into session, you call it to order, and then you gavel it, recess to the next day. All right, that's basically what you do. And during that time, since the Senate is technically open for business, the president cannot appoint somebody to fill one of the vacancies on one of the big boards, and in this case, the National Labor Relations Board. So if that made everything kind of confusing for you, basically what it is when the Senate, the U.S. Senate's in recess, the president can appoint members to these various governing boards. But if they're still in session, even though they're doing this procedural thing of calling the Senate to order every day, that's still in session. And what happened was Obama appointed some individuals to the National Labor Relations Board while the Senate was actually doing this, coming in to session every day. All right, at any rate, I mean, I think I even confused myself on that one. The Supreme Court will be called on yet again to settle a dispute between the Obama administration and its Republican critics on Monday when it hears arguments in the case of the National Labor Relations Board versus Noel Canning. At issue in the case is whether President Obama illegally appointed 3 officials to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, using recess appointments, the term used when the president approves someone for an executive branch position, a process that normally requires confirmation by the Senate while senators are out of town. The Supreme Court will examine whether the president can make appointments during recesses that occur during the regular Senate session or only during the once-a-year breaks that occur between sessions, and whether the position that is being filled must have been vacated during the same break in order for the president to use a recess appointment. Now, if you're not confused even more, at any rate, that is what the Supreme Court is discussing, really, right as we speak. And one expert says, I am not going to stand by while the minority in the Senate puts party ideology ahead of the people we were elected to serve. He said at the time, that was, let's see, let me see if I can pull a good quote here. Not really. I mean, basically that's what is at issue. And it's just, this is a big deal, but it isn't a big deal. I mean, if the Senate wants to try and keep the desk open so the president can't make some interim appointments, then the Senate has every right to do just that, whether it's Republican or Democrat. They want to go through the procedure every day. and hold the Senate open for business, which they can do. It doesn't take but 1 or 2 senators to make a motion and another to second it, then that's fine if the Senate wants to do that. And that's why it's kind of a dumb thing for President Obama to be doing while the U.S. Senate is in Democratic hands. Because what he does then is he kind of, you know, it's like shooting off your favorite firework. Once it's shot off, it's gone. And he could have waited and gotten whoever he wanted. Well, I guess he couldn't get it through the U.S. Senate because the minority could still block a nomination to the Labor Relations Board that they didn't want. Which, again, you know, I want to repeat to you, one of the hallmarks of our Republican Constitution is that it protects the rights of the minority. And it's sort of a sacred position that says that you always want to make sure that the minority has the right and the ability to become the majority. And that's a big, crucial part of our constitutional republic. And that's why where the Senate Republicans, with only 45 members, are able to block some of these more liberal, radical appointments by the Obama administration to boards like the Labor Relations Board. And that is a good way to explain to you what our founding fathers had in mind for the most deliberative body on planet Earth, the U.S. Senate, and that is that the minority could still block things. And it's a critical component to understand about our constitutional republic and what our founding fathers understood. And it's another bite at the apple that the founding fathers were worried about the tyranny of democracy, the tyranny of the mob. And that's why we have checks and balances against the mob, against popular uprisings. And that's why, you know, I was talking to my friend yesterday about, you know, she said of the Republicans that they were being obstructionists. And I said, well, I'm going to have to remind you that our Constitution is set up so that the minority can obstruct the process of legislation. That was intentional. And people have a tendency to forget that. And I have a tendency to remind them. Because it's critical to understand what our founding fathers had intended. You know, it's just important to understand what it is that is going on here. And it isn't just Republicans trying to be obstructionists. They have a right to be obstructionists. Just like the Tea Party had a right to elect Republicans in 2010 in opposition to Obamacare. And here's another way, you know, I was talking about the big deal being made over Chris Christie and the lane closures of Foxton or wherever it was. And it's just kind of a funny way to put it. It says, how Democrats react. Benghazi, silence. IRS abuse scandal, silence. Domestic spying, science, silence. Fast and Furious, silence. Traffic jam. We demand a federal investigation, which is really kind of ironic. I forgot to mention this to you. You probably heard about this. The Attorney General, our own chief law officer, Eric Holder, has launched a federal investigation into the lane closures in New Jersey. In fact, they're also looking into whether or not all of that disaster funds New Jersey got when they got that, you know, the big hurricane. What was it called? I forget now. Anyways, there's a suggestion out there that Christie misspent some of those disaster funds that New Jersey received from the Obama administration. But, you know, it's just so patently obvious that the liberals are going to go after Chris Christie big time. After winning re-election as a Republican for a second term in New Jersey, liberal, democratically controlled New Jersey, the first time they got an opportunity to go after Republican Chris Christie, man, the media just went after him like a pack of rabid hyenas. And let that be a lesson to all you wannabe conservatives out there. Never, ever trust the press. Never think that you've made it with your local newspaper. I'm telling you, if you're a conservative, eventually those dogs, those rabid dogs, are going to show up on your doorstep. It's just the way it works. All right, this is an interesting article. It comes from, I can't even pronounce this. It's PAK Alert. PAK Alert. PAKALERT. Press. And they have an interesting story, and I thought we'd do it. Interesting article here written by Michael Snyder. And it says, are you ready for the future where China will employ millions of American workers and dominate thousands of small communities all over the United States? Such a future would be unimaginable to many Americans, but the truth is that it is already starting to happen. Chinese acquisition of U.S. businesses set a new all-time record last year, and it is on pace to absolutely shatter that record this year. Meanwhile, China is gobbling up real estate and is establishing economic beachheads all over America. If China continues to build economic power inside the United States, it will eventually become the dominant economic force in thousands of small communities all over the nation. Just think about what the Smithfield Foods acquisition alone meant. Smithfield Foods is the largest pork producer and processor in the world. It has facilities in 26 U.S. states, and it employs tens of thousands of Americans. It directly owns 460 farms and has contracts with approximately 2,000 others. But now a Chinese company has bought it for $4.7 billion, and that means that the Chinese will now be the most important employer in dozens of rural communities all over America. If you don't think that is important, you haven't been paying much attention to what has been going on in the world. Thanks in part to our massively bloated trade deficit with China, the Chinese have trillions of dollars to spend. They are only just starting to exercise their economic muscle. And it is important to keep in mind that there is often not much of a difference between the Chinese government and the Chinese corporations. In 2011, 43% of all profits in China were produced by companies that the Chinese government had a controlling interest in. I mean, China is a curious mix of capitalism and communism. And that was just described to you in that last sentence. And again, I'll repeat it to you. In 2011, 43% of all profits in China were produced by companies that the Chinese government had a controlling interest in. Americans are accustomed to thinking of government and business as being separate things, but in China they are often one and the same. Even when there is a separation in ownership, the reality is that no major Chinese corporation is going to go against the authority and guidance of the Chinese government. The relationship between the government and the business in China is much different than it is in the United States. Over the past several years, Chinese companies have become increasingly aggressive. Last year, a Chinese company spent $2.6 billion to purchase AMC Entertainment, one of the largest movie theater chains in the United States. Now the Chinese company controls more movie ticket sales than anyone else in the world. At the time, that was the largest acquisition in the U.S. firm by a Chinese company, but now the Smithfield Food deal has greatly surpassed that. But China is not just relying on acquisitions to expand its economic power. The truth is that economic beachheads are being established all over America. For example, Golden Dragon Precise Copper Tube Group Inc. recently broke ground on a $100 million plant in Thomasville, Alabama. I'm sure that many of the residents of Thomasville, Alabama will be glad to have jobs, but it will also become yet another community that will now be heavily dependent on communist China. And guess where these Chinese companies are putting down roots? And I told you this was going to happen. Detroit. Yes, the poster child for the deindustrialization of America is being invaded by Chinese. The following comes from a recent CNBC article. Quote, dozens of companies from China are putting down roots in Detroit, part of the country's steadily push into America auto industry. Chinese-owned companies are investing in American businesses and new vehicle technology, selling everything from seatbelts to shock absorbers and retail stores, and hiring experienced engineers and designers in an effort to soak up the talent and expertise of domestic automakers and their suppliers. See, I told you. Remember we talked about Detroit here about 6 months ago, and that the Detroit city government was tearing down all of these dilapidated, abandoned homes in Detroit? And I told you the Chinese were going to go into Detroit, and here's that proof. If you recently purchased an American-made vehicle, there really is a good chance that it has a Chinese part in it. Well, we know that. In fact, it is becoming harder and harder to get auto parts that are actually made in America by American companies, and a lot of those companies are dying off. One example is this in the battery maker that had received get a load of this, $132 million from the federal government, that was recently gobbled up by a huge Chinese corporation. And they did even say in this damn article that the $132 million loan came from the Obama stimulus bill. And we actually reported on this story when it first happened. Let's see, what else? And of course we reported on this too. The Chinese are gobbling up energy companies in the U.S. and they're also buying up coal companies, and all our coal is being shipped to China. And Colorado, Conoco gained CNOOC gained a 1/3 stake in 800,000 acres in northeastern Colorado and southwest Wyoming in a $1.2 billion pact with Chesapeake Energy Corp. I used to have their stock. Louisiana, Sinopec has a 1/3, that's another Chinese corporation, has a 1/3 interest in over 265,000 acres in the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale after a broader $2.5 billion deal with Devon Energy. Michigan, same thing, and the same company, Sinopec, gained a 1/3 interest in 350,000 acres in a larger $2.5 billion deal with Devon Energy, another one. Iowa, same company. Sinopec from China acquired a 1/3 stake in another one of Devon's projects. Oklahoma, another Devon project they took over. Texas, another Chinese company, the CNOOC, acquired a 1/3 interest in another one of Chesapeake's energy projects. They got another one in Wyoming, another one in the Gulf of Mexico. So, I mean, really, you can see that the Chinese have a lot of interest in what's going on in the U.S., and they're buying up a lot of, particularly energy. And, you know, I guess one thing that's not alarming is in the instances we just read about, none of those deals were for a majority stake. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to be back here reporting that China got a majority stake in some of these companies we mentioned, like Chesapeake and Devon and stuff like that. So, I mean, really, all we can do is continue monitoring this Chinese story. And it says here, are you starting to get the picture? China is on the rise and America is in the decline. If you doubt this, just read below the list of facts, which comes from one of my previous articles entitled 40 Ways That China is Beating America. Number one, as I mentioned above, when you total up all imports and exports of goods, China is now the #1 trading nation on the entire planet. Now, that's just new. That's just new. China was #2 to the USA until the last several weeks or days. So that's kind of a sad day for the USA. And you're listening to Daniel Gray, my name, of course, and I go by the handle of Trailer Park Prophet, and we're broadcasting live from beautiful downtown Crestone, Colorado on Blog Talk Radio. This is Sunday on Monday. Thanks a lot for being here. We're talking about China right now. And China now has become the #1 trading country on planet Earth. Now, the USA is #2. And we're going through these lists of changes or actual standings that China now has in the world. #2, in 2012, we sold about $110 billion worth of stuff to the Chinese, but they sold about $425 billion worth of stuff to us. That was the largest trade deficit that one nation has had with another nation in the history of the world. #3, overall, the U.S. has run a trade deficit with China over the past decade that comes to more than $2.3 trillion. #4, China now has the largest new car market in the world. Well, they do have the most people, for crying out loud. China has more foreign currency reserves than anyone else on the planet. China is the #1 gold producer in the world. #7, China is also the #1 gold importer in the world. So they're accumulating a lot of assets there in China. Which means to me they want to keep in or whatever they're
#9, 85% of all artificial Christmas trees are made in China. You know, and I don't really care. Now tell me, is this wrong? Here's what came to mind. Something just popped in my mind. I read this. 85% of all artificial Christmas trees are made in China. And I had this instant thought,
and I want you to try and decide whether or not it's inappropriate. But I had a thought of all of these dear brothers and sisters in China who were going to suffer health issues because of manufacturing 85% of all artificial Christmas trees for the USA. And I thought, well, better them than us. And now I feel horrible. I really do. I wish, I don't know why I think stuff like that. I wish I wouldn't think about stuff like that. All right, number 10. Now, these are all reasons to come to the conclusion that China has taken over the USA. Number 10. The new World Trade Center tower is going to include glass that has been imported from China. Now, I don't know. It's not such a big deal. The new Martin Luther King Memorial on the National Mall was made in China. Now, that's kind of an insult, that beautiful sculpture. But, I'm not too upset by that. Number 12. One of the reasons it is so hard to export stuff to China is because of their tariffs. According to the New York Times, a Jeep Grand Cherokee that cost $27,490 in the United States cost about $85,000 in China thanks to all the tariffs. Now that is outrageous if that's true. And I have every reason to think that is true. That's one of the things that Donald Trump says all the time, that the people in our government in the USA are complete idiots, and they're letting countries like China just run over the top of us. And this could very well be an accurate example of that happening. And I believe this. I actually believe that a Jeep Grand Cherokee that cost $30,000 in the USA cost almost $90,000 in China because of China's tariffs. I have no doubt that's the case. And Donald Trump will tell you that there's no parity in terms of allowing Chinese products in here and how we're treated over there, that we're just getting screwed, and that the whole world is laughing at the USA because we allow stuff like this to happen. That is what really makes me angry, and this hurts us. This kind of shit hurts us. I'm sorry I said I got excited, but it really does. And I've heard this for years and years and years, not just Donald Trump. And believe me, our founding fathers thought that our federal government should be funded on the tariffs we put on imports. And I'm of that mind too. I mean, we should have tariffs. And sometimes these trade agreements are good, but a lot of times they're bad. And this is one good example of that. Number 13, the Chinese economy has grown 7 times faster than the U.S. economy has over the past decade. And that's true. Our average growth each year in the gross domestic product is about 3 to 6%. It's worse under Obama. But the Chinese, their growth rate is something like 7%, so almost twice as much. This says 7 times faster. And I guess they have had some growth in some years in China that have actually gone into double digits. So I agree with this number 13. Now, number 14. The United States has lost a staggering percent of its manufacturing jobs since 2000.
There's a lot of these jobs that, they're going to get shipped overseas. But you still are competing with salaries, and if things are made overseas like China, you still are competing with the shipping costs. But 32%? I don't know. That doesn't sound good. Losing 32% of your manufacturing jobs. You got to have a manufacturing base. You know, you need diversity. You need to have more than just one leg of your economic stool. One of those legs has to be manufacturing, and another one can be tourism, and another one can be mining. But you've got to have a multi-legged economic stool or it falls over. That's something that people in Gunnison or Chris Dickey or some of the luminaries in Gunnison, Colorado can't get through their progressive socialist thick skulls. Number 15, the United States has lost an average of 50,000 manufacturing jobs per month since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. 50,000 a month? 50,000 a month. That's a lot of good paying jobs. Okay, let's see. 17, according to the Economic Policy Institute, America is losing 500,000 jobs to China every single year. 500,000. Number 18, China now produces more than twice as many automobiles as the United States does. I don't know. It doesn't. I mean, if they were selling twice as many automobiles in the United States than United States companies manufactured, then I would see a problem there. But see, the thing is, you know, the thing in economics is that everything's a trade-off. And what a lot of progressive socialists don't understand is it doesn't take a lot of skill to actually help put together an automobile. The skill level in factories that make automobiles is very low. A lot of redundancy. And that's why China making a bunch of cars or making some other things like consumer goods like washing machines and VCRs and even computers, it doesn't really, matter, because what happens is that capital, money, follows cheap labor. And so historically what's happened is that capital went to, as an example, after World War II, went to Japan. Everything was made from Japan. And then as their standard of living in Japan rose, then their salaries rose, and capital decided to move to China or Vietnam or India. And now what's going on in China, and I don't know if we have time to do this story, is in China the cost of labor has gone up over the last 20 years, and China now is investing more money into robotics because of the cost of labor. So it is a natural ebb and flow in economics that capital will continue to follow cheap labor. And now there's a trend for corporations to come back on USA soil because the cost of labor in China has risen to the point where it's chilly, but it's kind of cool because some of the ice is melting, and about this time of day, it's just absolutely positively beautiful out there. I mean, I still gotta wear my puffy and my bordered shell, but it's nice. It's beautiful. And listen, if you want to call in, I don't see anybody. I always, after the show, I go to my
my stats to see how many people listened and how many people called in, and there's always a couple people that call in, and I always miss you because I'm here now. I'm looking at my computer screen, and I'm at the place at Blog Talk Radio called my studio, and I can play things here. I can take callers, and it looks like there's no callers. But if you'd like to call in, please do. It's 646-716-8506, and you too can talk to the Trailer Park Prophet. All right, back to this article, Meet Your New Boss. All right, what number was I on? Okay, here, 19. Oh, this is going to boil your blood. Number 19. China now produces more than... Okay, I did that one. 19, Prophet. 19, that was 18. 19. Since the auto industry bailout, approximately 70% of all GM vehicles have been built outside the United States. Now, I told you this was going to happen. That the bailout of GM was going to end up helping people overseas. And here's another example of that happening. Number 20, after being bailed out by U.S. taxpayers, General Motors is currently involved in 11 joint ventures with companies owned by Chinese government. The price for entering into many of these joint ventures was a transfer of state-of-the-art technology from General Motors and the Communist Chinese. 21. Back in 1998, the United States had 25% of the world's high-tech export market, and China had just 10%. 10 years later, the United States had less than 15%, and China's share had soared to 20%. 22. The United States has lost more than a quarter of its high-tech manufacturing jobs over the past 10 years. Now, that is the number that's alarming. The high-tech manufacturing jobs where there's actual skill involved. Those are the ones where the workers are making 35, 40 bucks an hour plus benefits. Those are the jobs that we want to keep. Number 23, China's number one export to the U.S. is computer equipment, but the number one U.S. export to China is scrap and trash. In other words, they're taking all of our scrap metal and anything that can be recycled. And so they're selling us computer equipment, which is what's called in economics value added. That's the stuff that you make money on. High-tech stuff, high-end stuff, expensive stuff. You don't make a lot of money on scrap and trash. 24, the U.S. trade deficit with China is now more than 30 times larger than it was in 1990. Number 25, China now consumes more energy than the United States does, which is another example of why curtailing our use of coal won't do anything for the environment, because the Chinese are burning more coal than the U.S., and it's dirty coal, and they don't have the same required pollution devices in China that we do in the U.S. That's just a fact. So no matter what we do to make our coal factories or power plants even more clean, will have little or no effect on the so-called greenhouse effect of burning fossil fuels. None whatsoever. All right, let's see. Interesting. China, of course, like we said, is
power on the entire globe, and part of the reason why all the green energy companies went bankrupt that got Obama money, Obama stimulus money, why they went bankrupt, is China saw all these U.S. companies getting USA stimulus money, and what the Chinese government can do, since they're communist capitalist, is they can produce products at a loss and dump them on the market to ruin the market. And that's what they did. And that's why a lot of those solar companies and wind companies in the U.S. got hurt, because China actually China dumped products, green energy products, in the U.S. and made those U.S. companies collapse. 29. There are more pigs in China than in the next 43 pork-producing nations combined. Well, they have all those people. That, I don't know if that tells me anything. Today, China produces nearly twice as much beer as the United States does. That's interesting. 31 right now, China is producing more than 3 times as much coal as the United States does. But I think the United States still has more coal than in any other country in the world. 33, China now produces 11 times as much steel as the United States. That's not a good sign. Oh man, how many more of these? I gotta stop. You can go to my website and check these out on your own time if you so desired, but you know, I'm getting to the point I'm starting to get a little depressed. I mean, it really does kind of look like we're going to be working for China, or at least some of our neighbors are, some of our relatives. Alright, next story. Let's see here. Nah, I don't want to do that story. It's an Obamacare story. I don't want to do that. I want to do this story about Hillary Clinton and Rush Limbaugh. This comes from Restoring Liberty, published by Joe Miller. Black dude, conservative, rather handsome. Headline: Hillary Clinton ranks dead last on most admired list behind Rush Limbaugh and Bush. Say it isn't so. Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State who leads all of the 2016 presidential polls, ranks dead last on a new top 10 poll of who Americans admire most. And at the bottom of who the world admires most, behind celebrities like Angelina Jolie and Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to the new YouGov.com poll conducted for the London Times, Microsoft's Bill Gates is the most admired person in the world. Really? And he's a progressive socialist. Ahead of Pope Francis and President Obama, the runner-up on that list, Hillary Clinton ranks 27th on the YouGov's World's List. On the U.S. list, she does even worse, coming in 10th of the 10 listed most named among Americans. Pope Francis is the most admired, followed by the President, evangelist Billy Graham, and former President George W. Bush. Even Rush Limbaugh, the nation's most popular conservative radio host, beat Clinton. He came in 9th. Ouch. Yeah. I mean, I know why I don't like Hillary. She's just too damn slick. And I'm sorry something happened in Benghazi. And remember, the whole time that she was at Secretary of State, she was just, there was all these reports of her being a little loaded on the plane and partying with her staff members, and you know, something just wasn't right. And here's that story I told you about. Robots replacing low-end workers in China. Many workers' positions have been filled by robots. Future cop says protesters should be... this guy is out of his freaking mind. I got this from the Conservative Infidel.
And it says, future cop says protesters should be exterminated in gas chambers. Really? And this was posted by, again, Benjamin Franklin. No relation to the signer of the Declaration of Independence. Actually, this story was written by... Oh, that's right. It was posted by Benjamin Franklin, but actually was written by Paul Joseph Watson. Writes here, I would beat your F-U-C-K-I-N-G ass for just for sheer joy of it. A trainee sheriff's deputy posted a threatening Facebook message aimed at a cop block, an organization which advocates filming police officers, in which the soon-to-be cop said that protesters should be exterminated in gas chambers and that he would beat them up just for the sheer joy of it. Quote, while it's rare that we receive direct death threats, they must be taken seriously, especially when they come from someone with military training and is about to become a law enforcement agent / sheriff, states a post on the official Cock Block Facebook page. According to the Cock Block, that's so funny, the threats were made by Darren Redding, a former U.S. Marine and a current candidate in training with the Washoe Sheriff's Department. Redding's Facebook page has now been deleted, but the messages sent to the Cock Block appear at the end of this article. In case you don't get it, Cock Block is about filming or videoing police, and I'm a big fan of this. But I'll tell you, cops don't like it. I got in trouble with the sheriff in Swatch County. I was in the courthouse and I saw him walking into the courthouse with Mayor Kisin-Lakai, and I was videotaping the two of them walking over to the courthouse. And I'm telling you, the Sheriff Sullivan, not Sheriff Sullivan, that's Arapahoe County. What's the guy? Sheriff, Norton, a real prick, short guy. I told you about him before. He'd get up in my face and just a prick. But he came upstairs in the courthouse and he demanded I give him my video camera. He was pissed. But we have every goddamn right on the planet to film police, particularly if they have something to do with us or somebody else. You have no expectation of privacy on a street, in public, whether you're a cop or a private citizen. You need to understand that. But I'm telling you, you can just turn a cop inside out by pointing your phone or camera at him. I mean, they will come unglued, some of them. And it says here, if I had my way, there would be another Holocaust with camps and gas chambers full of fucking CUNT scabs like you. I hope you die, stated Redding. This is on his Facebook page. What a moroff. Adding, I hope some cop beats your ass next time you're protesting or filming them or whatever. In fact, I'm about to start the training academy for the Washoe County Sheriff's Department in Reno, Nevada, and I can't wait to deal with ass bitches like you. I would beat your F-U-C-K-I-N ass just for the sheer joy of it. Boy, this guy's a lunatic. You think he's on steroids? You think he's got a thick neck? He goes on to say on Facebook, he says you were a law-abiding citizen, you wouldn't have any problem with 5-0. But something tells me you were probably being a jackass towards a police officer and you got what was coming to you. And that inspired you to make a page giving a bad name to all law enforcement, stated Redding, complaining about one of Cop Block's posts. You know, and then Cop Block came back and responded to the threats by inviting people to contact the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and suggest that they refrain from hiring someone who has expressed a desire to see people who exercise their right, gassed in concentration camps. Informer of other Facebook users responded. The numbers of the sheriff's office where he plans to apply should give out as well as emails for everyone. Anyway, blah 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 blah. We'll have to see if maybe. And here, I mean, it has screenshots of his stuff on Facebook. What an idiot! I mean, I can't imagine this guy winds up becomes a sheriff or a police officer with writings like that. My God. Talking about wanting to beat people's ass. I mean, that's not a good sign for a prospective law enforcement officer. And again, I got this article from the conservativeinfidel.com. Excellent website. All right, it's 2:30. My name is Daniel Gray. I'm the Trailer Park Prophet, and we're broadcasting live on Blog Talk Radio from beautiful Crestone, Colorado. I am the Trailer Park Prophet, and I am happy as a peach orchard boar that you've decided to be here today. I know you have a lot of choices out there, and it's just awesome that you're here with the Prophet. Tens of thousands of you are with Trailer Park Prophet. It's turbo cool. And we're growing every day, which is really cool. The next story I have is from the Washington Times. And I had to do this story because it's provocative, and I knew you guys probably would need a break by this point in the show. This story is written by a guy named Tom Howell Jr., and he says here in the Washington Times, a government report released Monday says Medicare is paying outsized amounts for male vacuum erection systems compared to non-Medicare payers. Or as I call them in my show prep, penis pumps. And in case you didn't know, guys, they can't get an erect penis, and Viagra doesn't work anymore. So science has come up with a penis implant that old guys can get surgically put into their dick, and there's actually a little pump that's on the inside of their skin, and the would-be Woody is pumped up by the little dick pump. In case some old guy needs a chubby, Still has the desire, but doesn't have the equipment. Well, now, thanks to science, he now has equipment that is modified, but still presents itself as the much-needed chubby. The Inspector General for the Department of Health and Human Services found that Medicare payments for the devices remain grossly excessive, or more than twice as much as the Department of Veteran Affairs and Consumers on the Internet pay. If the Medicare fee schedule amount for VES has been adjusted to approximate the amount paid for the same or similar devices by non-Medicare payers, the federal government would have saved an average of approximately $14.4 million for each of the 6 years reviewed. The Medicare beneficiaries would have saved approximately $3.6 million annually, the report says. In its response, the Centers, this is good. In its response, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services said it agreed with the Inspector General's belief that the agency should look at the vehicle known as the inherent reasonableness process, which relies on competitive bidding procedures. So, the federal government pays too much for penis implants. That should have been the headline. Seniors get a rise out of government. Maybe that could be the headline. Costs rising in Medicare. Penis implants, swelling budget. I like that one. Okay, moving on. This story is from the Gateway Pundit. This was posted by Patch Adams. Actually, when was this? On the 9th. And this story, I don't know, man. If I didn't read this, I wouldn't believe it, but here it is. Former Democrat State Senator Ed Gromes, Democratic State Representative Edward Vargas, and Lori Kennington, president of Local 34 Clerical and Technical Workers at Yale, John Olson, former Communist Award recipient and president of the Connecticut AFL-CIO and the 2013 CPUSA, which is the Communist Party USA Amstrad Awards. The progressives love to tout the separation of church and state, especially when it comes to prayer in public schools, but when it comes to public schools in New Haven, Connecticut, communists seem more than welcome. The Bell News reports last month that State Department politicians and local union president accepted awards from the Communist Party USA at an event held in a public high school. According to an article on the Communist Party USA News, People's World, the December 2013, a Communist Award ceremony was held in a New Haven, Connecticut public high school auditorium where the Democrat state rep, former Democrat state senator, and a local union president all received awards. New Haven, Connecticut, from the opening video and the drumming to the remarks of the awardees, songs, youth slideshow, finale, and the atmosphere, unity and optimism inspired the entire multiracial audience in the 2013 People's World Awards held in the auditorium of the Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School. In his closing remarks, Reverend Scott Marks brought the crowd to its feet as he called for door-to-door organizing that will move forward. That's the same line as the 2012 Democratic slogan was, move forward. The fight for jobs and other needs, I will not go back, he explained passionately. Marx and all the attendees praised the vision and work of the Communist Party in their communities. The event was held on the occasion of the 94th anniversary. State Senator Ed Combs, steelworker State Representative Edward Vargas, a teacher, and Lori Kennington, president of Local 34 Clerical and Technical Workers at Yale, all accepted large frame posters and a statue that stands in front of the New Haven City Hall, and they were cheered by family, friends, co-workers, elected officials, union, and community leaders. So, I mean, I did this story only because you should understand that the Communist Party is alive and well in the United States of America. Okay, we're not going to do that story. No, we're not going to do that story. What time do we have? 1939 or 2:39? Okay, this is kind of an interesting story. This is from Breitbart. Now, I don't ever remember this happening before. I'm sure it has, but I don't remember it happening. Again, this story comes from Breitbart, and the article that I'm going to address here is written by Matthew Boyle. Now, get a load of this. This is from Arizona. The Maricopa County Republican Party in Arizona formally censored Senator John McCain, Republican from Arizona, Saturday evening
by a overwhelming 1,000 to 351 votes. Breitbart News has learned Maricopa County is Arizona's most populous
county and includes Phoenix within its borders. The official GOP body rebuke undermines McCain's re-election chances should he decide to run for the U.S. Senate in 2016. I really doubt he's going to run for re-election, but still, this is a very in-your-face rebuke towards Senator McCain. I don't ever remember any Republican organization censoring a sitting elected Republican representative. I don't remember the Democrats doing it. I don't remember any Republicans doing it. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. I'm just saying that this is a real insult. And it's also a clarion call to future candidates in Arizona that they had better become more conservative than John McCain is. So this is a revelation, and this is definitely a harbinger of things to come in Arizona and maybe some other states too. And I have a quote here I want to share with you. It says, as leaders in the Republican Party, we are obliged to fully support our party platform and its candidates. The formal censure resolution reads, quote, only in times of great crisis for betrayal is it necessary to publicly censure our leaders. Today we are faced with both. For as long as we have waited hoping Senator McCain would return to our party's values on his own, that has not happened. The resolution continues by stating, with sadness and humility, the Republicans in the county rise and declare that McCain has amassed a long and terrible record of drafting, co-sponsoring, and voting for legislation best associated with liberal Democrats, such as amnesty, funding for Obamacare, the debt ceiling, assaults on the Constitution and Second Amendment, and has continued to support liberal nominees. So it's a big slap in the face. It really is. I'm really surprised. I can't remember something like this ever happening before. And it goes on to say, a little more in this article. If you want to read the whole article, you can go to my Facebook page, Trailer Park Prophet or Daniel Gray, and you can read this article. But these people in Mariposa County, they're serious to do something like this. I mean, that I'm really surprised. And I'm not surprised too often. But that rebuke, that censor of Senator McCain in Arizona, not good. All right, let's see here. We got to do this story. I don't want to do this story. I hate doing these stories, but I feel as a citizen journalist, it is my duty to bring you these stories about the advancing wave of Islam in the United States. I got to sound the clarion call, my fellow lovers of liberty. And the article here, I'm trying to see, where does this come from? Let's see. I don't know where this comes from, actually. It's called the Jews News. Jews News, that's where it comes from, by God. And the headline is, the Islamic takeover of the U.S. is gaining ground. America is going Muslim, and with the current policies in place, the Muslim Brotherhood infiltrating top government positions with an influx of immigration from Muslim countries, Islam will be taken over quicker than Phil Robertson can get suspended from Duck Dynasty for expressing his Christian views. It may sound far-fetched, but the rug is being pulled out from under us, and before anyone takes notice, the transformation will be complete. It goes on to say here, there is nothing like demographic data to illustrate a point. Immigration is changing the face of the nation, and there are irrefutable statistics which prove this very point. There is U.S. Census data, which is part of the picture, but there is
the 2010 U.S. religious census, religious congregations and membership study analyzed by the Washington Post in an article earlier this month by Niraja Kohorshi. This is the type of data that is often disregarded because anytime religion comes into play, people consider it a non-factor, insignificant, or for some reason unreliable information. However, this is a mistake. There will always be a margin of error in any study, no matter what the subject. In this case, religion plays an important role in our culture. In any culture, really, it sets the stage for our behavior as we are shaped by our beliefs and our culture. But with that being said, the melting pot of the United States is always molded by Judeo-Christian values set forth by forefathers who built the nation. But now that melting pot is doing less melting, and the bashing of Christianity and Judaism is perpetrated by the leftist liberal culture, which has overtaken the country, while all other religions are given free rein in the name of freedom of religion. This freedom of religion would be fine on two conditions. First, that the region or the religion of the majority, the religion that founded this nation, is also allowed to exist without the shame that it's being placed upon nowadays. And second, that any religion which seeks to eliminate the rest, like Islam, which seeks to conquer and destroy the nation, and which is dedicated by holy books and clerics calling for the violent acts of rape, murder in the name of their God, is not granted the same rights as other religions. In other words, Islam, the only religion which falls into the above-mentioned category, cannot be treated the same as other religions whose adherents simply wish to be left alone to worship in peace. Unfortunately, the opposite is happening. America is going Muslim. Sure, the South is still the Bible Belt, but with the Southern Baptist Church maintaining its strength, the Catholics are still prevalent throughout much of the country. However, the growing trend is secularism, and many Christians and Jews are becoming more secular, placing less importance on their religions, while the religions of the immigrants remain important. When those immigrants are Muslim, whose favorite chants at their protest against our government is death to America, death to Israel, and death to the UK. As they burn our flags, our lack of interest in our own religion is allowing Islam to creep in. And I fully agree with the assessment of this author that Islam is on the march. And I was going to do a story on Friday that was showing the number of mosques in the United States, and it's something now about 1,200 mosques across the United States. And I saw a map that pointed out where states like Texas already have over 100 mosques. Let's see, I have a little map here, maybe give me a little bit better information if I can read it. But California has over 100 mosques, New Jersey, New York. There's a lot of states here in the United States that are already inundated with mosques. And if you come in contact with them, you've got to understand that Islam is on the march in the United States, and it should really worry you, because they're not here to melt into the melting pot that is the United States. They're here to dominate. They're here to make the melting pot no longer melt in the United States and only be Islam. Now, let's see. Here's some bad news. And this is interesting too, and we've been reporting on this story, but this gives us another vehicle, sort of another angle to this story. And I'm fascinated with this story and this angle, because I think it's gonna be maybe, I mean, some are saying that this is a sign, and I talked a little bit about this on Friday, that the progressive socialist movement may be losing steam in regards to the failure of Obamacare. And I keep talking about the millennials Generation X, Generation Y, and how they're important to the overall mix of ideology in this country. But here's another story. This one's from the Boston Globe by a guy named Matt Visor. And basically what Matt is saying is that here's another example that the millennials are not very happy with the Obama administration. And he writes here, he says, an electric atmosphere took over the University of New Hampshire last election day. Students covered sidewalks with messages in chalk urging students to vote, and to vote for President Obama. Buses, minivans circled campus, shuttling students to the polls, and the efforts paid off. Obama carried Durham, New Hampshire by a 2-1 margin on his way to winning a crucial swing state. A little more than a year later, the mood has changed, alarmingly for Democratic Party leaders, in a shift that also is reflected in the national polls. Students are increasingly turned off by politics and by the Democratic Party. Even those who were enthusiastic about Obama say they are jaded by gridlock in Washington, disillusioned by the president they thought would be transformational. The public has seen that it wasn't magic. The public has seen that it wasn't magic, said Tyler Goldbrand, president of the UNH College Democrats. Quote, it wasn't this beautiful renaissance in our country. I think we expected a lot more, maybe just out of hope. Domestic spying by the government, the technology and competence demonstrated in the launch of Obamacare Marketplace, the continued weakness in the economy, all have conspired to undermine the Democratic big advantage among young voters ages 18 to 29, according to the specialists. Those are the millennials. In a detailed national poll released last month by Harvard Institute of Politics, nearly half of young voters said they would recall President Obama if they could. Now that is startling. Only 41% approved of the job Obama was doing, an 11-point drop in 6 months. It's a trend line that top Democrats are worried about, and one the top Republicans are trying to exploit into the 2014 midterm election. And again, I want to tell all you Republican bigwigs, you need to tell your story. You need to set up a website. You need to send people out there and get your message out there. You can't rely on the lamestream media. You need to buy up more lamestream media time for commercials, but you got to get your message out to the voters. You got to be able to tell the voters who you are. Stop allowing the progressive socialist movement and the lamestream media to define who the Republican Party is. You know, and part of that is doing what I do all the time. The 10 of the top 10 richest people in the United States, or 8 out of the top 10 richest people in the United States, are progressive socialists. The Chamber of Commerce is in bed with the Democratic Party. Stuff like that. That's the kind of message you need to get out there to people. That it was the Democratic Party that drafted all of the Jim Crow laws against the blacks in the South. That it was the Democratic Party that fought tooth and nail against the Republicans to provide equal protection of the law for blacks. I mean, you got to get the message out there. And then the other message is the worst prejudice is the low expectation of black people and minorities. We need to lift that kind of legislation out of our law books, and we need to start recognizing that having two different classes of expectations for different races in this country is going to destroy this country. And that's the kind of stuff the Republican Party needs to be involved with. But at any rate, moving on. This Democratic strategist, Tad Levine, said people should be concerned about those numbers. A longtime Democratic strategist said we got to take or make sure that young voters understand the stakes. Well, I don't know. Your message isn't doing so well, Tad. Many young people were inspired by Obama's message of hope and change. They believed government could do good and big things, and in droves they volunteered, campaigned, and voted for Democrats by margin that had not been seen before, both in 2008 and 2012. But surveys show that the electorate's newest generation is disappointed by the government's performance. Quote, it's about expectation in terms of the relationship that they have with their Washington, said John Della Volpa, the director of polling at the Harvard Institute of Politics. He says here, quote, when they elected President Obama in 2008, young people tell me through focus groups they were hoping for better, different, stronger relationship with their government. That hasn't played out. I mean, why would they want that kind of relationship with their government if they hadn't gone through progressive, socialist, big government union schools? I mean, it used to be that people felt like the last thing they want in their life or knocking on their front door is government. And yet these kids have been brainwashed into thinking that, yeah, we're hoping for a better, different, stronger relationship with our government. I mean, that really in and of itself is rather startling. And let's see, and it goes on and on. A really good article by the Boston Globe. I would recommend you reading it if you have an opportunity to do so. All right, let me scan here. Maybe we can do one more good story. Oh, this is kind of interesting. It's Senator Steny Hoyer, Congressman Steny Hoyer. House Dems will likely support a $9 billion cut in the rate of increase in the projected increase of food stamps over the next 10 years. Now, you're going to hear this, and I know you've heard this, that the Republicans wanted to cut $9 billion from food stamps. That's actually inaccurate. They wanted to cut $9 billion over 10 years of the rate of increase. They're only talking about cutting the rate of increase over the next 10 years. But the lamestream media, of course, will lie to you by omission and not tell you the rest of the story. All right, let's see. I kind of want to do that story. All right, we're going to have to leave some of these stories for next time. Drizzle drazzle, drizzle drone, time for this prophet to go home. It's time for me to get out of here. Oh, wait. Oh, I just blew that.
90 seconds.
It's time for me to get out of here. Listen, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. We'll be back on Wednesday. I have a little surprise for you on Wednesday. We're going to do a little more background on Black History Month. I'm going to bring up some of my all-time favorite people in honor of Black History Month.
60
Again, that's Hump Day with the Prophet on Wednesday. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, and that we will see you on Wednesday. Have any kind of day you want.